On Tuesday morning, I woke up and apparently while I was fast asleep on Monday night, a national tragedy had taken place. Apparently one of the referees in the NFL got a major call wrong during the Monday night football game. And of course, everyone on Tuesday morning was talking about it on the radio, on the news shows. Most of the news outlets, even the ones that don't typically care much about sports, were covering the story. It was an even bigger story given the fact that there were replacement refs. The regular refs that ref the NFL games were locked out and were in the middle of negotiations. And so there were replacement officials that had been reffing the last 3 or 4 weeks. And the replacement refs, it was sort of, you got the sense that some of the rules were being bended maybe a little bit. And you could get the sense, it kind of felt like a substitute teacher was in the classroom instead of the regular teacher. And you could just tell that the substitute refs were struggling. And this call then, of course, was the tipping point. And basically what happened was one team, the team that should have won the game, it came down to the very last play, and the team that should have won the game lost, and the other team won. And so obviously this big outcry from many people, and of course now the regular refs are back. The NFL worked the deal out with them, and but that got me thinking during this week as I was driving around listening to all of these people basically come close to losing their mind over this whole thing. The National Football League is this gigantic corporation, this $9 billion a year industry, I think is about the numbers. I mean, just gargantuan industry, and all the revenues and commercials and so forth. You have this gigantic industry, and yet after just a few weeks of the rules kind of being not officiated as sternly and as clearly as they probably should be, people were starting to leave. And the National Football League in some ways was actually starting to sort of crumble a little bit. And people were starting to question, well, if I don't even know how the rules are going to be applied and interpreted, and if the wrong team might win the game, then we start to see that people, people were already getting anxious, and some fans probably walking away from the game after just a few weeks of that. And I think that got me thinking then, of course, about this weekend's readings. David in the Psalm response today says that the precepts of the Lord give joy to the heart. The precepts of the Lord give joy to the heart. And I think that without rules, whether or not they're badly enforced or not, if there are no rules in the first place, the National Football League would fall apart because there would be nothing to watch. There would be no rules. And so without the rules, you can't have a game. And I think in a lot of ways, at the same time, everyone acknowledges the fact that the National Football League needs rules. And then without rules, this great game that so many people find joy from and enjoy getting together with friends, it couldn't happen without rules. And yet at the same time, I think when we shift that to our own life, many people wish there were no rules or no laws to follow. They see, again, God's rules and God's laws as a burden. David, in today's psalm, is saying the exact opposite. And he's saying it because I think it's especially relevant for us today because we need to hear it. He says, the precepts of the Lord, the rules that God gives us, they're the joy of my heart. They're the joy of my heart. How many of us would describe God's rules as that which gives us joy? We can talk about lots of different social issues. We have a beautiful treatment of how our migrant workers are cared for or abused. in our second reading today from St. James. You know, we have lots of issues to talk about. Abortion, contraception, all of these different things, all of these different teachings that are so important to our church. How we care for the poor. You know, all of these things, what the church teaches about war and violence. But the thing is, people oftentimes will ask, hey, Father, would you preach on that? Will you preach on social teaching X? I have an idea. How about you preach on that? Well, the problem is in today's culture that if everyone thinks that God's laws are a burden and that they can be cast aside here and there, well, then no one's going to care about what the church teaches anyways. It's odd that in the National Football League, when we're talking about a sport, everyone gets it. Everyone realizes we must have rules. And that without the rules, there cannot be a thriving, there cannot be a flourishing, there cannot be this celebration and this joy of this game. But when we take it to our own life, many of us have a different take. And we wish there were no rules. People realize very quickly in the National Football League what happens when there are no rules or the rules are badly enforced. Or when I follow this rule now, but sometimes I don't, and we never really know how or when the rules are going to be enforced. It's really unfortunate that we so oftentimes fail to take that and transition that into our own lives. G.K. Chesterton said in the early 1900s, he said that the laws of the church are a wall. They are a burden in a sense. They can be seen as keeping things out or keeping things in. He says they are a wall, but God's laws, the laws of the church, are the wall of a playground. What a beautiful way of saying that. What a beautiful way of telling us exactly the same thing that King David is saying in our psalm response today, that the precepts of the Lord give joy to the heart. I would say that if there's one problem that we face today as a society, if there's one thing that I would love to see fixed, no one cares what I would love to see fixed. I'm just a young priest. But for me, when I look at the world, I think one of the biggest problems that we face is that people see God's laws, even Catholics, see God's laws as a burden or as things that can be jettisoned on a whim. I can ignore this teaching, or I don't have to follow this teaching. I can just follow the ones that I like in picking and choosing. People that do that do not understand what King David is saying in today's reading, in today's psalm. They do not understand that God's laws and the laws of the church, they give joy to the heart. We pray today that the precepts of the Lord, the laws of the church, the laws that God has given to us, we pray that they not just give joy to the heart of King David. We pray that they also give joy to our hearts as well.